My name is David Mercer. I'm 44 years old, a major in the United States Army, and I run logistics at Fort Kavanaugh, a sprawling base tucked into the dry edge of central Texas. It was just past 0500 when I sat down in the mess kitchen, half awake, chewing through a granola bar that tasted like compressed sawdust. The base was still, the kind of stillness only night shift guards and early runners knew, with steam rising off the industrial coffee pot like fog rolling across a battlefield. The kitchen lights flickered once, then held steady. I didn't flinch. They always did that when the backup generators cycled their early check. I sipped from my steel mug, burned my tongue a little, and stared out the window at the concrete quiet. 20 years of muscle memory told me what time the first trucks would roll out, what units needed fuel, which inventories needed double-checking before the brass noticed. Most of it I didn't write down anymore. It lived in my bones. The buzz of my secure line cracked the stillness. I let it ring twice before picking up. It wasn't the content of the call that tightened my jaw. It was the voice. Lieutenant Colton, young, polite, way too eager for that hour. He said there was a scheduling conflict with the South Sector drill. The tone under his words said it wasn't an accident. The phrasing said someone had decided they didn't need me in the loop anymore. I gave a short reply, neutral. Told him I'd adjust and followed protocol. Hung up before he started explaining something I already knew. Then I just sat there, coffee cooling, fingers resting on the table edge. One drawer in my office had the full quartermaster contracts. Another had the backup drives, and one old folder, tucked in the back, still held the document I once helped write. The one nobody else remembered because nobody ever thought I'd need it. Outside, I could hear the low hum of a generator kicking on near the motor pool. Inside, everything stayed still. My stomach felt tight, not from food but from something quieter. Not anger, not fear, just the slow realization that something I'd built for decades was being taken apart piece by silent piece. And no one had said a word. I joined the Army when I was 24. Logistics wasn't glamorous, but I was good at it. Fast, accurate, and calm when things hit the fan. By 30, I'd moved up to major and had handled supply chains through 2 deployments, 3 disaster responses, and a dozen smaller fires most people never even saw. When fuel went missing or a convoy rerouted through hostile terrain, I found workarounds before anyone panicked. My CO used to joke that if the apocalypse came, he wanted me managing the ration lines. For a long time, that respect meant something. The old leadership knew my name. They'd walk into ops meetings and ask me what was real versus what looked good on paper. I didn't give speeches, I gave results. I could look at a broken chain and find the missing link before anyone else even noticed the loop was open. There were nights I ran 6 different units through simulated lockdowns while debugging actual inventory failures. I didn't sleep much. Didn't complain either. That wasn't my job. My job was to make sure everyone else could do theirs. But slowly, things started to shift. Promotions started coming from outside, people with shiny resumes and defense grad programs on their jackets. They talked about lean systems and horizontal integrations. They brought in dashboards that glowed but didn't tell you when something critical was missing. One even suggested cutting physical audits because the numbers looked fine digitally. I tried to push back, quietly at first. With data, with patience. But it didn't land. Not really. The new crowd didn't want to be told what wouldn't work. They wanted buy-in. They wanted consensus. I didn't know how to sugarcoat a failure. If a convoy was late, I said it. If ammo wasn't where it needed to be, I flagged it. No flair, no blame, just facts. That stopped being enough. Slowly, I saw my reports handed off to others. My name faded from briefings. My access shrank in ways no one would call direct, but they were no accident. I started keeping a record. Not because I wanted revenge, because it felt like the only way to prove I wasn't losing my grip. I still had respect from the crews on the ground, the sergeants and specialists who saw the real picture. But above me, the air got thinner. And the higher they climbed, the less they looked down. I wasn't bitter, just aware. A pillar doesn't move. But when the roof forgets who's holding it up, eventually, something cracks. It didn't happen all at once. It was missed credits in reports. New officers asking questions I'd answered months earlier. Meetings where I was present but invisible. The phrase legacy system started to show up, not about tech, about people, about me. I laughed the first time I heard it, then I didn't. I was still doing the work, still holding the weight. But the spotlight had moved on. And that's when I started thinking, not about quitting, about leverage. About what happens when the last quiet man in the room decides it's time to speak without raising his voice. It started with meetings, not all at once. Just 1 or 2 ops reviews that used to land on my calendar every week. They didn't show up one Monday. I thought it was a glitch. Then a week later, the supply chain briefing disappeared too. No heads up, no redirect. Just gone. When I checked with admin, they said the invite list had been streamlined. Leaner flow, they called it. I wasn't even angry. Just noted the term, another buzzword hiding a decision. Next came the dashboards. The master access I'd used for years to monitor cross-unit readiness started throwing errors. I submitted a ticket like everyone else, knowing exactly who had revoked it. 2 days later, I was granted partial access. Read only. I could still see the gaps, still spot the flaws, but I couldn't fix them. That part was no longer my job, apparently. Then there was the report. My logistics efficiency model. A system I'd refined through 15 months of rollout, testing, revision, feedback. It showed up in the base command update, presented by a captain who wasn't even stationed here last year. He called it a collaborative restructuring framework. Not a word about where it came from. I watched him fumble through slide 3, explaining something I'd written from scratch. He smiled the whole time. None of this was labeled. No formal memos, no direct demotion. He asked questions that had already been answered in past reports. Ignored protocols because they didn't match his flowcharts. When I pointed out flaws in his rollout, he said we'd iterate later. The first real mistake came on a resupply to a remote training camp. He changed the loadout sequence, said it was more efficient. We warned him it ignored terrain logistics. He ran it anyway. They lost 4 hours and burned through backup fuel. Still, he called it a success. Said it was a learning curve. I didn't argue. I just logged the incident, timestamped everything, added it to the folder. Walker thought I was a footnote. That's the problem with people who only see surface. They forget the foundation until it cracks. And by the time they notice, the damage is already done. It was a quiet Sunday morning when I opened the archive folder. Most folks on base were off-duty, enjoying their window of peace. I sat alone in my office with the blinds half closed and the lights dimmed. The file was buried 3 folders deep, behind procurement schedules and audit summaries. The contract hadn't been touched in over a year. I scrolled slowly, letting my eyes adjust to old formatting and red lines that still carried my initials. I remembered the negotiations. The stakes were high, a $22 million logistics contract with a private defense firm out of Colorado. High risk, high reward, and high visibility. Back then, command had pushed for speed. I pushed for clarity. We spent weeks going clause by clause, especially around continuity. The contractor had one non-negotiable. They needed a named lead. Not a department, not a title. A person. Someone who would carry the weight and answer for breakdowns. I stepped up, put my name in the slot, not because I wanted credit. Because I knew I'd protect it better than anyone. Clause 7, 4B. That was the anchor. If the named lead resigns voluntarily, the contractor reserves the right to terminate the agreement in full, without penalty. One sentence. Ironclad. No spin. No ambiguity. I had almost forgotten it was still there. Reading it again felt like opening a locked drawer and finding something sharper than you remembered. I didn't move fast. That wasn't the point. I reviewed the clause 3 times. Checked the signature dates. Cross-referenced the version with the legal archive. Everything matched. No amendments. No overrides. Still active. I printed it out, signed page visible, and slipped it into the folder where I kept everything else. Emails, call logs, change logs, incident flags. The folder was getting heavier by the week. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. Just sat there for a while, tapping the edge of the paper against the desk. The people above me had made it clear they thought I was obsolete. What they didn't realize was they were sitting on a time bomb, and I still held the detonator. It started with a single screenshot, just one. A supply chain memo stripped of attribution, my name replaced with a junior officer's initials. No big announcement, no correction, just a slow erasure of authorship. I saved it without a word. Created a folder deep inside my personal drive, encrypted and mirrored off base. I called it Fall of Honor. Next came the Slack messages. Conversations where I flagged system bugs that were later credited to others after fixes were pushed. I kept the timestamps, cross-checked audit trails, layered them with server logs that still showed my credentials initiating the rollback patches. Every thread, every deletion, every time my permissions changed without notice, it all went in. Quiet documentation. Not to confront, not yet. Then came the call logs. Late night alerts I handled solo, buried under generic status updates the next day. No mention of who resolved the risk. No trace of who stayed up to prevent failure. I had proof. Voice memos, summaries, response times. It wasn't about proving value anymore. It was about showing the pattern, consistent, systemic, deliberate. Lieutenant Walker's name came up more than once. His suggestions replacing protocols I'd tested for years. His decisions leading to small fires that I extinguished behind the scenes. The base stayed clean on paper, but the cracks were growing. They just didn't show in the presentations. I kept collecting. Every missed credit, every denied request, every silent override, not for revenge, for record. The folder swelled to over 200 documents. I organized them by type, date, and risk category. Even added annotations where command might try to claim ambiguity. I didn't share it, didn't tease it. I just built it brick by brick. A case no one could ignore once it opened. Calm hands, cold focus. Every piece added was a quiet step toward the moment I'd choose to use it. When the time came, no one would be able to say they didn't know, and no one would see it coming until it was too late. At exactly 0700 hours, I logged into the Zoom call. The screen grid filled with senior officers, Pentagon reps, and the contractor's legal counsel. Evan, the contractor's liaison, was mid-pitch. He was outlining proposed upgrades, talking in firm, fast tones, his camera frame just right. I kept my mic muted, let the rhythm build, let the show play. My background was black. Centered in white, bold text, resignation effective 0715 October 2. No sound, no announcement, just a shift in the screen. People didn't notice at first, but then one camera blinked, then another. I lifted my badge, held it up between thumb and forefinger. My name, rank, and ID number clearly visible. The light caught the laminate edge, just enough to reflect. Then I raised the contract. Printed, highlighted, Clause 7, 4B circled, in red. The air changed. You could feel it through the screen. Evan stuttered. His voice faltered mid-slide. One of the generals squinted at his monitor, leaned forward. Someone unmuted and immediately muted again. The Pentagon rep leaned back. He wasn't confused. He was assessing, reading the timestamp, reading the clause. Evan looked around his screen like someone else might jump in. No one did. No one said a word. The silence held like a blade. Every second ticking was pressure. A countdown they hadn't noticed until the last few digits. My camera didn't shake, my expression didn't change. I just let them look, let them see what had already been done. No speech, no drama, just the paper and the badge. Evan finally asked if this was official. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I clicked leave meeting. The window closed with a soft sound, the digital version of a door slamming shut. Inside that silence, everything shifted. And they knew it. They all knew it. By 0930 the next morning, the contractor's general counsel sent the termination notice. A single-page PDF. No flair, no apology. Subject line, activation of Clause 7(4)(b). The body was 5 lines long. Effective immediately, due to the voluntary resignation of Major David Mercer, we are terminating the agreement per contract terms. The email reached command before their coffee was cold. The $22 million deal collapsed like a dropped radio. No negotiations, no fallback, just void. Inside headquarters, the mood shifted from confusion to chaos. Schedules cleared. Closed-door huddles began. People who hadn't spoken my name in months suddenly wanted to know every task I'd touched. Evan was blindsided. Word spread that he hadn't read the clause, or worse, ignored it. A Slack thread from legal surfaced, dated 2 weeks prior, warning him to review the continuity provisions. He'd left it unread. Now it was screenshot, archived, and shared like a campfire ghost story. One colonel asked in an email, "Who reviewed this contract?" Another replied, "Apparently, not enough of us." Chain of command calls spiked. So did messages from procurement. Someone tried to spin it as a temporary setback. But the contractor's systems were already being pulled offline, access revoked, files locked. The infrastructure we'd built together began to unspool. At 1,400 hours, Evan held a mandatory call with internal stakeholders. It lasted 11 minutes. He opened with a slide titled Strategic Reset. Midway through, a staffer interrupted. "What clause?" Silence followed. Then the slide deck froze. Someone leaked the call by evening. By nightfall, the entire base had heard. Operations paused, budgets frozen. A second contractor pulled their proposal off the table. Risk too high. Legal issued a base-wide memo. All contracts now subject to re-audit. That same memo was quietly CC'd to the Pentagon. They tried to recover, but the damage wasn't tactical. It was foundational, and it came not with noise, but with silence. The silence of someone who knew the system too well and chose the exact moment to step away. By the end of the week, Evan was gone. No announcement, no ceremony, just a missing name from the internal roster and a reassigned inbox. His calendar wiped clean. Someone said it was mutual. No one believed that. Leadership never issued a formal statement. But actions spoke louder. Projects paused. Review boards reshuffled. The silence from above said what their words couldn't. I stayed quiet. I didn't take calls. I didn't answer the emails. I let the dust settle. My resignation had been clean, precise. I had nothing else to prove. Then the offer came in. Not from a recruiter, not through LinkedIn. A letter, handwritten, on real paper. From a private defense training group out of Colorado. Lean, sharp, well-funded, led by people who'd done the work, not just managed it. They weren't looking for a figurehead. They wanted a builder. Someone who knew how to hold the line. The note was short. "We followed your story. We believe in how you lead. Full autonomy. Your systems, your team, no interference, just impact." I didn't rush the decision. Took a weekend, walked the trail behind my cabin. Let the quiet speak first. On Monday, I said yes. No contract battles. No legal hedging. Just a clean handshake and a mission that made sense. I flew out the next week. The office was small, tucked into the Rockies. No plaques, no fancy titles, just people who listened. My first morning, someone handed me coffee. No small talk. Just, "Glad you're here." That was enough. I didn't need redemption. I needed peace. And I'd earned it. Not with speeches or spotlight, but with clarity. I built something. I defended it. And when it was time, I let it fall the right way. Now I get to build again. This time, with people who understand that real power doesn't come from shouting. It comes from knowing when to be silent and when to walk away.